which I think will probably last half an hour. So this is going to be challenging, but I'll do my best. So we can go over, can we? Oh, good. Right, okay. So yeah, just to introduce myself, my name is Phil Cooper. I am the CIO and Director of Sterling Geo. For those of you who don't know what a CIO is, so when you're a director of a company, you can occasionally make up your own job title. So I'm the Chief Innovation Officer for Sterling Geo. It's good fun, this. And also, you're privileged. This is our brand new logo. So everyone's going to get to see our nice new logo. Great fun. So my talk is about UK Space Agency and why on earth were they using FME Cloud. Just to make sure that we keep the British end up, we do have our own astronaut, called Tim Peake. He obviously is heavily involved with the UK Space Agency. And just to remind you all that we were there first. We got up there definitely before anybody else was up there, even if I was in the films. Challenge in the UK we have is we don't have quite the same level of budget, perhaps, that NASA has, or the horsepower. In fact, I've just checked. This has a 39 horsepower engine, which means that it would need 2.05 million of these things to do the same thing that Chris Hadfield was telling us this morning with his 80 million horsepower. In the UK, one of the challenges that we have is austerity. And there's an awful lot of cutbacks going on at the moment. So we have to think about clever and innovative ways of trying to produce the same level of service for a significantly less level of budget. We've had 30% cuts, and now we've had 40% cuts. Now, as an organisation, we're constantly looking at, well, how can we address this with the technology? And that's certainly where cloud has a significant part to play. So, as a business as well, we are heavily involved in using and exploiting Earth observation imagery, so satellite imagery data. And the value of imagery is huge. It was a certain level of irony when I saw this earlier on in the keynote speech, is that when you look at an image like that, you start interpreting it. When you look at it, you can start looking at it. You can start seeing where London is. You can start seeing the major centres of the United Kingdom. Your brain instinctively starts picking results and information from it. So what we have to start doing is start using technology to do the same thing. And that's what we did. The other thing as well, which comes to satellite imagery, was about 20, 30 years ago, entire PhDs were written on a single satellite image. You just couldn't find the data. It was tough. One Landsat image a year if you were lucky. Well, now we have a slightly different problem. Nowadays, there's more imagery, more data than you can throw a stick at. And it's just gargantuan amounts of it. So once again, we had to sort of start thinking about, well, how do we start looking at the useful data? What out there can we actually make use of? And that's where FME has a lot. And we do have a very dynamic Earth. It's constantly changing, constantly being imaged. So, the project. So we won a project as a business about a year and a half ago with the UK Space Agency. And the focus of the project that we put forward was this concept that could we create one application, only one, and 100 organisations within the UK government sector could use that one application. So we needed to create a vehicle that reduced the barriers to EO data, because people were searching for it and they were looking at pretty pictures, and that's really, really nice. But fundamentally, and I'm not sure if the chap from Planet is in the room, people don't buy data. What they buy is information. And what they'll access is the information you get from it. It looks very pretty, and trust me, I've got lots and lots of fantastic photographs and images on the wall, but it's the information that you want to get out of it. The second part of our activity was, could we create a long-term sustainable use, pragmatically, of remote sensing data? Remote sensing data has a slight problem. Clouds. Clouds get in the way. And you can't always guarantee the reliability of it. So we have to be very pragmatic. Could we deliver answers? I came up with the term answers as a service. Actually, that's actually what people were after. And could we design answers that met the needs of the client, not just the abilities of technology? So these were the key focus of our project and what we did. So we started with a fuel source, and that fuel source is the satellite imagery data. For those of you who have a green disposition, clearly we have green energy. And what do we feed into it? So we have access now to the Sentinel constellation of satellites. For those of you who were in Dimitri's talk the other day, his presentation, those who aren't familiar with it, Sentinel's brilliant because it gives us a huge source of data. Sentinel-2 on the visible, Sentinel-1 on the radar, and the others, there's a whole series of these things coming through. This is great. This is a really good fuel source. But people don't want the image. They want the output. Sentinel-2 was the data set that we focused on very specifically. And I'll get to the application we built in a minute because it's so simple, you'll go, but that's ridiculous. But it's just really simple. We focused on one thing, the Sentinel-2. The other thing as well, for those of you who don't know about Landsat and why it was first launched, the reason they launched Landsat, a little bit of history here, was the Americans wanted to watch the Russians. Oh, the irony. They wanted to watch them because they wanted to know what the agricultural crop levels were, because if they knew how healthy the crops were, they could decide how much subsidy to pay the farmers in America. So the American market was not flooded. So they launched this satellite in the 1970s to produce this imagery data set. And we needed to focus on what we're going to do with that. So the benefit of satellite imagery is you can monitor change. And that's its key value. The world is very, very turbulent. We're always changing things. But we never know where the next change will occur. And change is really important. For those of us in the UK, we are still reeling from Brexit. We have to think about what the next change might be before another part of the British Isles may exit, whether it's Yorkshire or whether it's Cornwall. Satellite imagery gives us a chance to access and monitor that change on the ground. And just not to ignore Canada, you never know which part might break off next. So now I'll get to FME. So what FME have done, and we have locked onto, embraced, consumed, and stretched, and we will continue to stretch, is they've put some fantastic new readers in there, because remote sensing is suddenly of relevance, and so they're seeing it because we've got a lot of data. So whether it's Sentinel-1, whether it's Sentinel-2, or the Planet readers, and I'm sure there are more to come, we've taken full advantage of this in this program. Right, so we've got the fuel sorted out. We're doing for time, pretty good, I think. Got the fuel sorted out. So one of the first things that we did was we created the ability to just alert us when a new image was available. One of the challenges of data was you had to keep looking for it. Wouldn't it be nice if somebody told you when a new image was there that you could actually use? So, Gavin, who's sitting over there, because I didn't write this, wrote us an alerter, and it just said a very simple thing: a new image is available via either email or Slack. So that first application, that really simple first thing that we deployed and made available to local authorities was, there is a new satellite image over your area. Do you want to do something about it? Because so much time gets spent looking for data. So much time can be wasted looking for something. Using FME, you can automate this process, and it just says, yep, something there. Do you want to do something about it? The decision then is in your hands. So this particular workbench, basically, first of all, it filters and processes, gets us in details, and then I now get lovely Slack notifications every time a new satellite image is available over the United Kingdom. Brilliant. Simple application, providing something very, very useful. There it is. It's quite a lot of cloud over the UK. But the point is that power means that you can start using it when it's relevant. Set the criteria, the cloud cover if you want to, and then you get the output from that. Right, engines, FME engines. We like talking about FME engines. You can do lots of processing in these things. The other thing as well, which we also set with Slack, or is people like to have email, same thing again. Check the availability and check the cloud cover. Email, find the recipient, and send the email. So not only do I get Slack messages telling me when satellite images are available, I get emails as well. Very, very simple service, but very, very useful to us. So we now have answers as a service. The input for FME is the Sentinel-2, the Landsat, all the Planet inputs. Using the cloud, they can spin up the instances and then shut them back down again when the process is finished. This is a very efficient way of accessing the data and delivering it. And the second application, which we are focusing on, is green space. One of the things that got us a lot of momentum when we started this program with UK Space Agency was what's called a green space analyzer. Monitoring something very, very simple, actually. How much green space is there? And how much green space has changed? It's not rocket science. It's actually really, really simple. But what it delivers was something very, very clear. So, once again, if you were in Dimitri's talk, we talked about NDVI. NDVI tells you how healthy vegetation is, and if it's changing, how much greenness has gone up or gone down. I also get Slack messages about this as well. Thanks, Gav. So some quick architecture about how the system that we built up, that was built out for it, using the cloud. And if you really want to go into details of that, don't ask me, ask Gavin. But the point about this is what we were trying to deliver out. This was something very, very simple. And here's what the output is, really just quickly skipping along, is you start with content. We've got our engines. We do some analysis. And then you get a nice presentation. The output is something that somebody can understand. You can see some output. So we need to design that output. I'm going to skip through these because I'm out of time. And this was one of the first green space analyzers that was produced. There's no satellite imagery. There's no pretty pictures. Oh, sorry, I'm wandering. Sorry, I have a habit of wandering. The output gives you some information. In this particular instance, we're looking at green space change over Warwickshire. This is all driven from satellite imagery. This is NDVI. This is notification. But the output is simply how much green space is there. And people can understand this. Non-geospatial experts, people who don't ever have to touch the data, they don't have to see the data, they just get some analysis, some detail. If I click on this area, how much green space is there? How much grey space? Or interestingly, how much blue as well? The other thing as well is once you know what the green space is, you can also see how much change has taken place over time. Here again, this is where business analytics starts to become very, very powerful. Very, very quickly, you can look at the example here of Copenhagen, and we can see different regions that have changed. Now, we actually spoke to the municipality of Copenhagen, and the guy on the phone was going, oh yes, that's interesting, that makes sense, because they've been redeveloping an area of Copenhagen, therefore it's dropped down. What was most interesting, if you look at the stat on the far left-hand side, was there's been a 3% increase in green space in Copenhagen. Suddenly they got a piece of information that showed them actually some policies they may have implemented or some activity in the city had actually had a result. It's that piece of information that comes from the satellite imagery. This is where the value comes from all those pretty pictures, all those workbenches, and this was driven by FME. It was very, very impactful. The interesting thing when we started working with the UK government on this project was we were actually given a remit to go out to all government agencies and say, tell us your problems, and if we can solve them with satellite imagery, we can give you an app. Yeah. This kind of got out of control pretty fast. Suddenly, what we started getting was not intricate problems or intricate technology. This is really simple. What's your problem? How can we solve it? And what we were doing was adapting our knowledge of remote sensing and satellite imagery to simply output information. So we did SSSI health monitoring. So, see if it's working. In this particular instance, we took one area and we said, well, how healthy is the vegetation in this one area? And that initial process took maybe 20, 25 minutes. We then ran it for the other 9,250 sites in the United Kingdom, and it took 30 seconds. And this is where running processes on the cloud becomes incredibly powerful. You create your workflow, you get the first one, and then you just run it again across all the rest of them, and you just keep going. The other interesting thing, and it was mentioned about cost, it's incredibly cheap. Because you only do it once, and you run it, and then you get the output. So the power of the cloud, it comes in the health. So we did that for the SSSI. Once again, another client said, oh, that's really interesting. Now, actually, the problem that I suffer from is burns on moorlands. So the national parks have burns, they have controlled burns. So what do? We said, that's the problem. How can satellite imagery solve the problem? Same thing again, took their areas, and we actually cross-compared known burn area, which had been scarred on a landscape, with areas that should be burned and shouldn't be. And what they were really interested in was looking at where are people burning illegally. Same thing again, run the process in the cloud. You're giving an answer, piece of information that's relevant to them. Now, interesting, the back-end process is exactly the same. We're still running NDVI process, change detection, except the piece of information you're portraying to the burn guys is just different from you are portraying to the health guys for the SSSIs. There we go. And actually, what we did was we output a little map for them as well, because people still quite like maps, thankfully. And the notification service I've already mentioned. We've got Sentinel Landsat notification service processing through and just telling them where it's available. And it can be available within several days, only a couple of days afterwards as well. Once again, it was good enough for them. And that's, I think, the same copy of the same workbench in a slightly tidier manner. There we go. There's lots of emails and big pictures. Right. This is the one that's quite close to my heart. Terribly, so I'm running over time. Whilst we were talking to this, we started talking to the World Bank about how we could do green space monitoring and urban, and they said, well, that sounds really interesting. You know, could we do this for urban expansion? And I said, yeah, probably could. So we got permission from UK Space Agency to extend slightly the programme to include Tanzania, which isn't quite in the UK, but they were pretty forgiving. What we did here was we took the same principle again, change monitoring, vegetation health change. But what they were interested in was looking at the expansion of Dar es Salaam. Now, Dar es Salaam is one of the fastest growing cities in Africa. They get 25,000 people a month turning up there. Just using archive satellite imagery, these two images really, really effectively show that green-grey space change. And I hope you can see quite clearly. That was what it was like in 1995, 2014. This is a very rapidly expanding city. Now, if you can start looking at where that change is happening, you can start informing them about where do they start needing to plan, where does the infrastructure start to have to go, which is growing fastest. And we took this a stage further. Actually, I'm going to skip very, very quickly. And this was the delivery. This is what we delivered to them using the processing. Which new sectors of Dar es Salaam are growing incredibly fast? Because the problem they had was they have a limited supply of surveyors. Where do they send them next? The middle part doesn't change that much, but what we were able to understand, this is all driven by, remember, this is all openly available, free satellite imagery driving this in the cloud. They could start where they needed to start deploying the survey teams in Dar es Salaam. So this was a real biggie, and has led on to a lot more work with the World Bank. So very, very quickly, the program, we got lots and lots of ideas, which I've only given you a few examples today. We ended up delivering 138, I think it was in the NGAV, across the United Kingdom, a variety of applications. And if you can see them up there, I've got a little pointer. Everything from city growth modelling, customised data portals, green analysers, green analyzer 2. I'm trying to see if the jellyfish one's up there. Maybe it isn't. If anyone wants to ask me about the jellyfish monitor, come and ask me about that afterwards. However, key thing is, we would not have been able to do any of these applications without the power of FME. Thank you. All right. Is it working? There we go. So this one up here, if anyone wants to ask me, that's jellyfish in our power station. And you can monitor them coming in. But each one of these represents an application that we can start to drive from using satellite imagery, whether it's humanitarian, whether it's vegetation near power lines, whether it's illegal building, whether it's search and rescue. The point about this is what we're doing is we're reusing 80% of the same technology time and time again. But you take a specific question and you give a specific answer. And that really, really has been the most powerful thing that we learned out of the program. So, and for those of you who have met me before, those of you who haven't, the cloud is definitely our future. And it's not scary, it's actually quite friendly. Thank you. Sorry, I rattled through quite a lot of things there. I'm not sure. Does anyone have any questions at all? If you want to grab me afterwards, then I can tell you about all the other 100 applications that we've been writing. Thank you very much.